Allentown, Pennsylvania, March 5th, 2018. Both were picked up at Playa del Carmen, a resort town in a Mexican state of Quintana Roo, to be returned back to the United States. Authorities have said ICE, the U.S., and Mexican law enforcement have all cooperated on this case. Oh wait, I'm ahead of myself again. Let me back up. Kevin and Stacy Easterly would meet the Hughes, a family in western Lehigh County. The Hughes consist of a mother and her 2 kids, a young boy and girl. Their father, whom she's apart from, lives in China. So they all meet at this local church in Low Hill Township. The Easterlys, Kevin and Stacy, have 4 daughters. They treated Amy like a 5th daughter. Amy had even become best friends with the Easterlys' eldest daughter. They'd take her on family vacations. I mean, they've been knowing the girl now since she was 7. So she would go with them to beaches, lakes, amusement parks, with the family everywhere. She was always wanted, invited, enjoyed. I'm sure Amy's mother had gratitude at this time that some good people were showing interest in her daughter. She was a single mother. Her husband had left the United States to go to China, and for some reason, he could not come back to the U.S. So, Mei Lu Yu, she would end up raising her 2 kids on her own. She was a single mother. It was that summer, that the Easterlys began to fight. Amy, she was 16 now. Stacy was starting to not like the relationship that her husband was having with Amy. I mean, they've known her since she was 7. What type of relationship could Kevin possibly be having with a 16-year-old girl now? Kevin said he was just attempting to be a dad to her, a father figure.
I love your dad.
But they were fighting every day, and it was always over Amy. The fighting was becoming redundant. Stacy found out Kevin was even tracking Amy's cell phone. He was like a man possessed by Amy. Stacy would even tell Amy maybe she couldn't come around for a little while because the turmoil was just too much in the house. Amy kind of rolled her eyes at her and said, basically, why should she not come around just because them 2 were fighting? Mei Lu had went to the Academy Charter School one afternoon to sign her daughter out early, beknownst to Amy that her mother was even coming. At this time, Amy's mother had found out that Kevin had been signing her daughter out of school. He had signed her out of school at this point 10 times, posing as her stepfather. Mei Lu was livid. She would say, "No stepfather." Lu would not even know that this was even going on behind her back. She would tell the Academy Charter School to contact the police if this happens again.
Call police.
If possible, file a restraining order. She was upset. She had no idea that her daughter had missed 10 days on different times of school being signed out by Kevin Easterly. Maylou would go and confront Kevin. Stacy, I don't believe at this point was around. She was upset and Kevin knew it. He apologized profusely. He said he would never do it again. Maylou told him that the police was going to investigate her claims. Kevin grew very angry. Maylou, she took her daughter's cell phone and she discovered inappropriate text messages between her 16-year-old daughter and this 45-year-old married family man. Now, Kevin's at home and for some reason he wasn't allowing his wife to look through his Facebook messages, to be on his Facebook. I mean, what was going on? What are you doing? On February 15th, Maylou called the police and told them that she wanted the Easterlings, including Stacy at this time, to stay away from her daughter. At this time, Stacy was made aware that Kevin had been signing Amy out of school. Why? Why was he going to the school and signing Amy out? This would escalate even more fighting. Kevin at this point was barely even seeing his own daughters. He had this fixation and obsession with Amy Lou. It was all about Amy. He couldn't help himself. I mean, he couldn't stop. He was like a madman. It was like he was on a drug and he really needed this Amy dosage. He was really out of control. Kevin, he would even lose his job as a concrete contractor. He also was a coach of a all-girls, I think, soccer team. But he couldn't focus on anything but Amy. I mean, you're fighting with your wife. You're not even paying too much attention to your own daughters. And you've lost your job. Oh, it gets better. He rented an apartment for $650. It was 4 blocks away from, guess who? You guessed it, Amy Yu. Now, this was found out because the landlord had filed to evict him. The landlord wanted his money.
Get out.
When Stacy found out about this apartment, she asked the landlord, "Why would you rent to a married man that has children?" She actually would say this on Dr. Phil's show. A landlord will rent to whoever is going to pay the rent. The question is, why was this married man, your husband, getting an apartment anyway? But he had the apartment. I wonder what he was doing in that apartment, because some nights he didn't even come home. At this point, Stacy was really oblivious to the fact. She woke up just a little bit. That's when Kevin would take $4,000 out of her account, and he would take off with, drum roll please, Amy. On March 5th, Amy left the high school willingly with money that she had stolen from her mother and a little, quote, jewelry, unquote, that her mother said was stolen too. She didn't get off the school bus that afternoon, but she did get in Kevin's car. Mei-Lu would go and file a missing persons report on her 16-year-old teenage daughter. At that time, the couple, that's right, the father and daughter couple, Kevin and Amy, they went to Philadelphia International Airport, and they would catch a flight to Mexico, but no one knew at that time what was going on. So while Mei-Lu was putting the missing persons report together, Kevin's wife would go on national TV. She knew now that her husband was gone. She would plead for Kevin and Amy to return. An Amber Alert was issued. Amy may be a victim of crime. By May 7th, at least one of them were listed as endangered. But by now, they were out of the country. All this was being made public on purpose. The national media wanted to make sure that the father and so-called daughter pair would see this. While investigating Kevin, they discovered he had one-way tickets to Philly, then to Dallas, and then to Cancun. On day 12, Kevin and Amy were finally found. Stacy would get back on TV and say she is so glad to know that Amy is back with her mother.
I'm ecstatic.
But Kevin, he would be back with the cops. Kevin started to call Stacy collect. She tells her lawyer at this time, yep, she went and retained a lawyer.
Pick up, Stacy.
She would tell her lawyer that she was not going to answer any of the collect calls from her husband from prison. She wanted nothing to do with it. At this point, I'm thinking to myself, that's right, girl. You stand up for your rights and you get that scum out of your life. That's what I'm saying in my head. In court, Kevin would tell the judge, quote, I wanted to protect Amy, be a father figure to her, unquote. Meanwhile, remember, he had abandoned his own 4 daughters while being a father figure to Amy. The judge would hold a photo of Kevin and Amy at the beach in Mexico with a beer in her hand. The judge said, quote, you just can't let her go. The judge said, you just need for her to be with you. The judge also said, is this how you maintain being a father figure? Yep. Amy Lou in a bikini drinking a beer on the beach with her dad. It was chaos. It was insane. And at the same time, it was sad. The wife was now in court and she was crying and she was telling the judge how her husband had left her destitute with 4 children. And now her 4 kids would need counseling. Remember the eldest one? This was her best friend. Your best friend runs off with your dad? The kids were even teasing her children, saying, are you going to be a child molester like your father when you grow up? Mei-Lu had her own issues at the home. Amy was sticking up for him. Amy was saying be lenient on him. Even in court, she would say it.
Please be lenient.
The amount of money that Amy stole from her own mother was $10,000. So between these two, they had $14,000 to fund their getaway, all at the expense of Maylou and Stacy. I mean, that's terrible. On trial, Amy would say, quote, "It's more than gross, and the people who believe it without actually being there need to check themselves before looking at me," unquote. Amy said she asked the judge to give leniency with her boyfriend. I mean, Kevin. To give leniency to Kevin. She would tell the judge that she was going to leave anyway to get away from her abusive mother, and that Kevin was trying to persuade her to stay. But she said she was going anyway, and she didn't care no more. So Kevin said he went with her, to protect her, and that Amy even purchased the ticket for Kevin. This story is so out of control and sordid. You must check it out yourself, because I'm sure there is so much more to the story. It is insane. And it still continues in 2021. Maylou, she said, quote, "I can't believe I trusted him. All these years, this guy is bad. I can't believe he acted like that," unquote. I was looking at some things on Dr. Phil, some snippets of his show. Dr. Phil has said, quote, "What are you pretending not to know?" unquote. I guess it hurts less when you pretend that this isn't happening, because she doesn't even believe, or at least at that time, she didn't believe that her husband had anything sexually going on with her husband. I mean, how naive can one get? She actually didn't think that. She even said she confronted her husband about a text message where Amy was telling him not to shave until she saw him. And he said, "I hope that's not a long time from now," or something like that. So they were really suspect during this whole time. But this wife is trying to act like these things were not going on. I mean, Dr. Phil even asked her, he has a hotel room. I mean, an apartment, excuse me. They had the hotel room later. He had a whole apartment. She said she was hoping it was for another woman, but it wasn't. He got the apartment so that he can be with Amy. Amy's own mother said there was some nights that she wouldn't even come home, and every day she had to leave, and she would ask, "Where are you going?" But at this time, Amy was very defiant teenager, taking the advantage of the fact that her mother spoke broken English, and Amy was one of those teenage girls. We all know those. Some of us used to be those. So, I mean, she was pretty much getting away with everything. So she would leave and go stay with her dad. Yeah. I'm so done.